Welcome, Minister Bowen. Nice to have you in here in this circle with us. Welcome to the forum. We've heard a whole range of interesting points coming out from the diverse stakeholders involved in this arena, and I look forward to hearing from you. So let me introduce the Minister for Climate Change, Honourable Chris Bowen, and he's somewhere.
Well, thank you very much. And of course, this year Australians will have an extraordinary opportunity to embrace an offer from the heart, an offer provided with patience and respect, and a step forward as a nation in our ongoing journey towards reconciliation. This year, Australians will have an opportunity to enshrine an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament in the Constitution, a voice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, to provide advice to government on policies that affect them. And this is, of course, the first step in a process of truth-telling and treaty making. Now, we approach the Uluru Statement from the heart with hope and humility. With humility because the time for constitutional change is long overdue, but with hope because I believe, and we believe, that Australians are ready to make the change. I grew up here in Western Sydney, the land from which I join you today. Always was, always will be, the land of the Gabbargal people, and I pay my respects to them, their elders past, present and emerging. And I pay my respects to their courage and determination to help build Australia, which is better and fairer. And I also join in with you in paying respects to the elders of all First Peoples across our country, including the First Peoples on the lands from which you gather today. Well, this is an important time for carbon farming and carbon markets, and a well-functioning and regulated carbon market helps us drive investment in projects that support emissions reduction. And using carbon markets to foster and utilise thousands of years of Indigenous knowledge of our land is particularly important to me personally. So that's why we are implementing an ambitious suite of policy reforms. 2030 is now 18 months away. 18 months to reach a target of 43% emissions reduction. And so we don't have a second to waste. In March, Parliament passed our Safeguard Mechanism Bill, putting Australia's largest emitters on a pathway to net zero by 2050. The strengthened safeguards will create demand for ACCU projects right across Australia, leading to increased opportunities for farmers and land managers and for First Nations peoples. ACCUs will continue to help industry meet their emissions reduction obligations and will contribute to Australia's 2030 and net zero targets. But we need to ensure the system underpinning ACCUs is effective. So that's why I commissioned an independent review led by Professor Ian Chubb to ensure confidence in its integrity and effectiveness. This review panel consulted widely. They consulted industry and regional communities and First Nations people and native title representative groups. The review concluded that the ACCU scheme arrangements were fundamentally sound. However, it did recommend some sensible changes to strengthen the scheme, including changes to some of the governance arrangements. Now, through the review process, ICIN supported native title representative bodies and land councils so that they could provide carbon advice to native title holders, approach to provide consent. ICIN also requested the government to remove the ability to conditionally register projects on native title lands prior to obtaining consent. The Chubb review heard you and recommended this course of action, and of course we've accepted this course of action in relation to native title consent. Recommendation 11 directly addresses these suggestions and is a priority for our next tranche of implementation of the Chubb review recommendations. One of the things the panel examined was the broader impact of carbon projects on agriculture, biodiversity and participation of First Nations peoples and regional communities. The panel recommended more support for regional communities and First Nations peoples to participate in and benefit from the scheme. And this is something we've made good progress on, an early start. We've invested over $20 million in the new carbon farming outreach program. The program will support Australian farmers and land managers, including First Nations peoples, to participate in carbon markets. It'll also help them integrate low emissions technologies and practices into their operations. Grants under the program, I'm pleased to tell you, will be open for application soon. These grants will be trusted and independent advisors to provide training and support across Australia. Now, following the Chubb review, we've put in place new governance and transparency arrangements that will facilitate the scheme's broader reforms. My department is now starting a new round of consultation that will enable a second tranche of administrative and legislative changes this year. They'll be seeking views on issues such as reforms to developing a pathway for First Nations participation, including negotiating native title consent, creating the new Carbon Abatement Integrity Committee, establishing a new proponent-led method for development processes. So I encourage you to make your voices known about these reforms. Now, I know that Savannah Fire Management Method is a particular strength of your members, and it's something I'm very supportive of. It helps generate millions of dollars worth of ACCUs across Australia each year. I want to thank you for your efforts to improve that method. The development of this method is a high priority for me personally and for the government. It'll provide an opportunity to include new carbon pools, such as living biomass and more sophisticated modelling of other pools of biomass. That's likely to result in increased abatement opportunities for projects. And the development will also provide more First Nations communities an ability to use the method by expanding its applicability to areas with pinned vegetation. So the draft method is well advanced. My department will continue to work closely with you and with other stakeholders to ensure it meets the needs of participants. This includes an ability to account for more representative fire management regimes prior to ACCU scheme participation, as well as fairer ways for gamba grass to be managed in projects. We know that the new Savannah abatement tool is an important part of making the method more accessible for projects to calculate the benefit of transitions to it. The integrated farm and land management method is also very important, as you know. We'll continue to develop both methods to develop new opportunities, including opportunities to recognise the full abatement benefits of projects like tree planting, native forest regeneration, and activities to increase soil carbon. We'll continue to work with you to make sure these opportunities are realised. So in conclusion, climate change is, of course, as you know, everyone's business. It requires collective action of all Australians. It's an all of society effort. First Nations people are natural partners in efforts to realise Australia's emissions reductions ambition, to realise a once-in-a-century transformation in our economy, picking up on thousands of years of learnings. By working together, we can succeed, I know, in tackling this challenge and seize the enormous opportunities that come from climate action, not least the benefits that the carbon market industry has to offer. So I value your leadership on First Nations participation in industry, and I really look forward to working much more closely with you in the future on these important tasks. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you, Minister. And I understand that you've got time for some questions?
A couple, yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So do we have some questions from the screen?
Everyone's happy.
Yeah,
Everyone's happy. Now here it goes, Suzanne.
And hi, Minister. Suzanne Thompson, Central Western Queensland, Outback Central Western Queensland, and a HIR carbon practitioner, but also I call myself an Indigenous carbon farmer. Thank you for your presentation to us all. The question that I have is, and I think it's really important when we think about that outreach program and how the outreach programs rolled out throughout Australia, in particular, I know in regional areas, and something I've been discussing with our regional mayor and CEO around how do we inform more, because as an Indigenous carbon farmer practitioner in Central Western Outback Queensland, and Cedar Maranoa is quite a challenge, and in the sense of our lens and who we are as First Nations people with that knowledge, but it's about caring for country and the importance of that caring for country. For me, though, it's also the importance of how we grew our knowledge, and that growing of our knowledge was through the Indigenous Carbon Network. When I reflect back to thinking, you know, it was a membership of 5 with 2.5 days a week that Anna was providing for us to think of where we've grown now as 28, 29 members in that short period of time, and the knowledge, but also witnessing the excitement around First Nations people sharing their knowledge and leading in this climate change as survivors of 2 climate change, ice ages and whatnot. Would you imagine that there would be some more support there for ISON to be able to become that stronger voice as a network for Indigenous practitioners, so we have more of a, not so much a one-stop shop, but it's that one voice in this space, because in particular we're all informing and practitioners, whether it's through policy and I think through a whole lot of levels, but also that support that we're provided on the cultural knowledge space. Thank you.
Yeah, look, thank you for the commentary and the question. I'm very interested in exploring that with you. I'd be very open to that. I'd be keen to hear more from you about what more value you think you can add with that sort of collaboration, and I'd ask my department to work with you on that, and very open to talking to you directly about that at the right time as well. So the door's open for that conversation. I think you've done great work so far, and if there's a way we can further integrate that into our outreach initiatives, I'm very open to hearing about it and thinking about it and working with you on it.
Thanks, Minister.
Cherie Bruce, can I invite you to talk to the Minister about emerging markets and meaningful engagement?
Absolutely. Thank you, Carol. Hello, Minister. My name's Cherie Bruce. I'm an Arundel woman from Lepanto, or Alice Springs. I am the science advisor for ICIN. I'm an environmental scientist and I'm doing my PhD in First Nations fungi knowledge. It's one of the main things that came up in our discussions, so some common comments was about that free, prior and informed consent. And, there's a lot of literature out there and a lot of guides that tell us what free, prior and informed consent is. But what we're seeing on the ground is a lack of time in actually making sure that we are covering the free, prior and informed consent. So there was a call for possibly asking the government to, and you don't have to answer this now, of course, this is just feedback, that could there be a definition or some sort of time frame or some other definition that could be defined as to what's really good length of engagement? Because what we're finding is in complex projects like this, we might be given 2 weeks or maximum of 2 months. And that's not long enough to talk to our elders and all our family members and then other groups that we obviously share country with. So perhaps that could be something that could be further discussed.
Yeah, okay. I hear you, and I certainly agree with you. It's got to be a decent period of consultation to make it meet those criteria, and, in a way that any reasonable person would accept.
Yeah.
Meets the criteria of free and fully informed, etc. So happy to. I think the Chubb Review did try and tackle this issue to a degree.
Yeah.
But whether there's more to do, again, I'm very open to that conversation because it's very important to me to make sure that it's real consultation. Yes.
Fantastic. So can you recommend a department that we would go to first for that, or is it yourself so that ICIN can approach someone to, because we're going to start looking at expanding our current definition and our guidelines. So if there's someone we could work with in the government.
Yeah, I think in the first instance, my department on this matter. Obviously, then there'll be Attorney General's department and in the various Indigenous affairs agencies, etc. But in the first instance, the contacts that you have in my department, I'm sure, could facilitate that conversation for you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Alan, good to see you've turned your screen on. So let me invite you, Alan Williams, to talk about, to speak to the Minister about some of the many issues that you've spoken on about land tenure and some of the issues that you're experiencing in your communities.
Yeah, I was just talking about, Minister, I don't know if you're the right one, but it might be environment, but it was talking about how a lot of the agencies in, that fall under the DPI section there in New South Wales, a lot of government agencies are sort of working in that cultural burning space, trying to improve that, where they're all coming under the same banner, but they're all sort of working in silos, like on their own and not working together. Like, it'd probably be, we need to sort of try and tackle that sort of situation now so that we're all on the same level there. That's mainly my experience in New South Wales. But, because at the moment we've got all different agencies there in New South Wales that are all doing all separate things. And some agencies look like they're just trying to react to the cultural burn movement there just to be a part of it. So they're not missing out. So they're not really getting the concept of it. The reason we need to be looking at cultural burning was because obviously that's the way Aboriginal people have cared for country for a long time, and it all contributes to a cycle where we're part of the cycle, and cultural burn is part of the cycle, and it's all about caring for country and stuff. But yeah, my main thing was in New South Wales, it looks like all government agencies are, a lot of government agencies are working in silos in that cultural burning space, and we're really trying to improve that space at the moment. And I think when they're working in silos, that's working against what we're trying to achieve, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a few different concerns, but yeah, that was my main concern there, is just making sure that we're, all the government agencies under that one banner are all working together in improving the space moving forward.
No, fair enough, Alan. I hear you, and that is concerning. Yeah, that isn't directly me. That would be a combination of the Federal Environment Department and the New South Wales Environment Department. I'm travelling tomorrow to Alice Springs with the New South Wales Environment Minister, so I'll mention that concern that you've raised with her, to her, and just pass that concern on, because I think that's very valid.
Yeah.
Thank
no
you.
worries.
And Rowan, thank you, Alan. Rowan Foley, let me invite you, Bud, to make some comments around valuing IP, which you've made comments about over the last day or so.
Thanks. G'day, Chris, Minister. I've got a simple question, Minister. When are you going to lift the trade barriers so we can access the EU? That's the market we want to get access to, and you're blocking access to it. So when are you going to lift those trade barriers?
Well, the thing is about trade barriers is they move both ways, and at the moment we do not allow international credits to be used in Australia because I can't verify the value of projects overseas. There's a couple of very small exceptions to that, but I'm not going to open up the international market until and unless I can be assured that projects we're recognising overseas are real emissions abatement, etc. So I've got no problems with Europeans, using Australian credits, but I do have problems with Australians using international credits if they're not real. And anything's got to be done in a two-way street. So I'm not going to hold out any sort of, false hope that can happen quickly, because my obligation is to ensure that emissions reduction is real. And at the moment, there's a whole bunch of credits around the world that I can't put my hand on my heart and say, I know that's real emissions reduction. And it could be the case that, in particular markets, we can get there and say, yep, we're satisfied with your regime and we're satisfied that your integrity is as good as ours. So therefore allow trading, but we're a fair way from that at this point.
And just one follow-up question, if I may. We have a very positive program in the Indo-Pacific where a number of Australian carbon companies, including ourselves, we're one of several, working throughout the Indo-Pacific. There was a $104 million 10-year plan under the previous government. Is there still the same commitment under this government? How do we reach out to our Indo-Pacific family?
Well, I think you're right in terms of where there is the most scope for international cooperation. It is in the Indo-Pacific, and that has certain development dividends as well. And, as you know, our government has really stepped up engagement with the Pacific family, as we call it, to ensure much better relations than had previously existed. So I'm keen on further exploring that. I agree with you that that's probably where the action is. But again, there's more work and more collaboration to be done before I'm prepared to make any sort of particular policy commitments about a direction of travel for international trade in the Pacific.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Any more questions, comments? Teddy Barnard, what about you, Bud? You made some nice, really interesting points the last day or so.
No question from me at all.
Okay. Jennifer Ansell.
Hi, Minister. My name's Jennifer Ansell, and I work as the CEO for Alpha, Arnhem Land Fire Abatement. And I just had a really quick question in terms of maximising the benefits and the really significant benefits from participation of First Nations people in the ERF. Alpha would very much like to talk to the government about reviewing some of the ERF carbon abatement contract exit arrangements, and particularly where the parties to the contracts are organisations like Alpha that operate as charities, are registered charities with the ACNC, and who actually reinvest all of the income from the sale of ACCUs to support those amazing on-ground environmental, social and cultural outcomes.
Sure. Okay. Well, what why don't you get in contact with me, send me an email, and I'm happy to look at further discussing that with you.
Thank you, Minister.
Time for a couple more questions, Minister.
I do have another appointment bearing down on me, so one more if you've got one.
One more, okay. Rex Werribone, who's not Rex Werribone, Amelia.
I'm sorry, I couldn't change that name, but Rex's login. So we've had a question around where there's the consent. Would you be looking at that consent process also happening with land councils where appropriate? Where the PBC may not have native title, or where the land council has largely been seen as the Indigenous landholder in the area.
On the face of it, that sounds like a sensible approach, but I would need to take further advice and consult further in that next round of implementation. But where the land council has a clear and role, then I'd be open to considering that.
Thank you. Would you join me in thanking the Minister?
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on, and look forward to running into you on my travels. I'm keen to get out and see more of your projects around the country. Now that we're through almost the first year of office, hopefully there's more opportunities for me to meet some of you. I've met some of you around the traps, but I'd like to see a lot more. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.